What drew you into the narcissistic relationship that you were in or are in? Let's just take out family relationships for now because you didn't choose those. But what I'm going to share here in this video will be relevant to those. But any narcissistic relationship, especially like a partner or friendship, what made this person compelling enough to hang out, to want to hang out? Attractiveness, intelligence, shared values, similar background, money, charisma, charm, confidence, fun, status and credentials, something powerful, like they would take care of stuff, maybe even that they were older or more wise or more established. You felt useful? They listened? Or was it just right place, right time? What was it? Now that's an exercise for you to do. I listed a bunch of stuff. The thing that made you want to hang with them, whatever. Maybe something that's not on this list. Now, remember, we meet interesting people quite often. That doesn't mean we keep hanging out with them. We may meet a person who's interesting, learn a few things, understand their appeal, but might even say, meh, I don't need to talk to them again. I literally just had that happen to me last night, so I understand. But something was not only attractive about them, but the far more important issue is that there was something that kept you saying, yeah, I want to spend more time with this person. And then something even more important happened. Something kept you stuck. Listen, just like that list of things that attracts us, everything from attractiveness to fun to smarts to all of it, the stuff that keeps us in includes all the stuff on the attraction list. And then you can add stuff like inertia, comfort, something to do. In a healthy relationship, all of this can then blossom into a lifelong partnership or friendship. In a narcissistic relationship, all of this can then fester into being stuck. Staying in a relationship and being stuck are not the same thing. Staying in is really that keep going piece, right? The first date becomes the 30th date, becomes moving in together or getting engaged or traveling together. Staying is that you keep making plans and may not even really be registering that something's wrong if something is wrong. Maybe, again, a few small red flags, a few pink flags, but mostly if you're staying in, it feels generally fine and you're in it. Now, there is a day when the story shifts and it's no longer about staying, but it becomes about being stuck. It's no longer about I am in this and it's my relationship, but it's more about this is not good for me and I do not know what to do. By this time, many people have learned about narcissism and its dynamics, and some have not. But what you do know is that you're not happy. But also you're thinking, I don't know what to do. Stuck means confusion. Do I go? Do I not? Is it me? Is it them? Some of this relationship is fine. Some of it is awful. And that's where I'd like to think YouTube channels like this matter, where we can break down concepts like trauma bonds and the whole narcissistic relationship mess, and hopefully you get more clarity. However, stuckness is not always the same, and it can vary on the basis of the type of narcissistic relationship you are in. While there are multiple types of narcissism, we are going to stick with the big three: grandiose, vulnerable, and malignant. And the reasons you are stuck are going to be quite different depending on which of these types of relationship you are in. So let's start with relationships with the malignant narcissistic folks. This tends to be more severe narcissism, more manipulative, more isolating, more controlling, more exploitative, and taking advantages of your vulnerabilities or playing on your vulnerabilities, more coercive. It is possible that this malignant narcissistic person can have some vulnerable features like playing the victim, or some grandiose features like being charming in a crowd. But by and large, malignant narcissistic people are willing to be mean. They kind of are mean, very, very mean, and then act as though their cruelty is warranted, or minimize their cruelty, or allege that their cruelty is misunderstood. People in relationships with malignant narcissists are stuck because they're scared. And for good reason. Post-separation abuse is very likely to happen, especially since coercive control is much more likely to be witnessed in these relationships. Not only is the relationship comprised of high-level manipulation, because it is also compounded by isolation. People in these relationships are caught in toxic echo chambers where they keep wondering, is it me? And they're also told, yeah, it's you. And the only voice they hear is that of the malignant narcissistic person saying it over and over again. Yep, you're the problem. So the confusion is overwhelming. But despite that internal self-questioning process, there is also the rational fear of what will happen if I leave. Malignant narcissistic partners are masterful at manipulating not just children, but also adults in the environment to their side of the thinking, to their side of what's happening in their relationship. They use financial control and the power they have in the world to make life very difficult, if not dangerous, for someone who would consider leaving the relationship. The entitlement plus the malevolence of the malignant narcissistic person means that they truly do believe that they should get anything they want. And malignant narcissistic people are very vindictive. There is a sadistic, punitive element to this version of narcissism, which means that the post-separation landscape isn't just a few angry texts, but can be a multi-year terrifying campaign of threats, revenge, low or high-level stalking, tech abuse, legal abuse, and that's real. Anytime I have shepherded someone through a divorce with a malignant narcissistic person, they have looked at me and said, Dr. Ramani, if I knew it was going to be this hard, I'm not sure I would have started down this road. Now, people are relieved down the road when they do get to the other side. But while they are in it, and it can go on for years, many have developed severe physical and psychological illnesses, unmanageable anxiety, and financial devastation. So the fear, realistic and internal, is the stuck factor here in malignant narcissistic relationships. Listen, the true crime world is full of stories of the worst outcomes that can happen when someone attempts to leave a malignant narcissistic person. And outside of these kinds of stories, we still hear protracted family court stories about long-term harassment, severe financial abuse, and survivors who live with symptoms of complex trauma for a long time. Then we have vulnerable narcissism. And the stuck factor here in relationships with people who are vulnerably narcissistic are pity and guilt, what I call the magnet emotions. The stuff that makes it hard to leave because you feel bad, Vulnerable narcissism can look like anxiety or depression. And those may also be present for the vulnerably narcissistic person. And it may just look like anxiety and depression for a long time. Vulnerable narcissism can also manifest as failure to launch, social isolation, less of that charisma charm stuff, and more of a socially unskilled, sullen, petulant, victimized, passive-aggressive person. It's like being in a relationship with a wet, moldy towel that yells at you, but that when it is dry, it feels like that towel needs your help. When you are in a relationship with a vulnerable narcissistic partner or friend, you feel like a therapist / life coach / pacifier who is on call 24 hours a day to appease, reassure, cheerlead, and above all else, always pick up the slack. In relationships with vulnerable narcissistic partners, you aren't doing all the stuff around the house and keeping everything just so because you were scared, but rather you're doing it because it is easier than listening to their adolescent whimpering because they don't want to empty the dishwasher BS, or because they are so busy on their grandiose fantasy project that's never going to make any money. The stuck factor in the vulnerable narcissistic relationship, as I said, is very much pity and guilt, because many folks in these relationships think, I'm not convinced that this person could even think their way out of a paper bag, let alone care for themselves. Or because there are so many negative moods like depression or anxiety mixed in there. It may feel for many people in these relationships like, I can't leave them, they're down on their luck, it doesn't feel good for me to step away from someone where it isn't coming together. You may strangely feel responsible for them. This is the group of folks that often erroneously get the label codependent. Now, the vacillation between the vulnerable narcissistic person's passive-aggressive tantrums, silent treatment, but then the moments where you actually see them try, and it can be painful to watch, but they just can't stick the landing. And then they're mad at you when they get it wrong. It can definitely be confusing. The more empathic and compassionate and patient you are, the more that you will feel stuck in a relationship with somebody who is a vulnerable narcissist. Because even as you are eroding and getting exhausted and worn out more and more every day, and often taking on more and more as part of the trauma-bonded experience here, that sense of responsibility, feeling sorry for them, almost like you have to stay in it because no one else will with them, or just a sense of guilt about thinking about even leaving someone when they aren't doing well or life isn't going the way that they had hoped. And in many cases, you may also feel that they aren't up to the task of co-parenting or parallel parenting, can mean that the guilt and pity are the stuck factors. And then there are the grandiose narcissistic folks. And what is so often the stuck factor here? Most often, interestingly, it is, what if I'm wrong? Grandiose narcissistic partners are challenging in that if they don't have too much malignant, angry stuff sprinkled on top, and especially with grandiose narcissists, when everything is going their way, or at least most things are going their way, or they think that they're going their way, the charm and charisma and extroversion can show up regularly. And yes, they will treat you with contempt. And this is the narcissistic type that tends to be most likely to betray through infidelity and cheating. The roller coaster of these grandiose narcissistic relationships, their hypocrisy and double standards, flirting shamelessly in front of you, having contempt for you, being tantruming, entitled brats when things don't go their way, demanding attention from everyone, expecting to be the center of attention everywhere they go, and perhaps even feeling competitive with a 7-year-old who's getting all the attention on their birthday party day. If the grandiose narcissistic person has other stuff that's going for them, going the way they want in their lives, for example, they're able to provide a nice lifestyle, or they have a large social group that they are part of, the trauma bond here can be tough, because the peaks and valleys can be extremes of really fun, memorable moments with them to really humiliating and dehumanizing. But people in these relationships with grandiose narcissistic folks, because there often is jealousy and triangulation, will wonder, oh gosh, they are attractive, or we do have a nice life, or they're fun, or we do fun things, or we travel, or we have these big get-togethers, or we entertain, or the grandkids like them. People feel stuck because there is a lot to like sometimes, and they'll often wonder, what if I'm wrong? It isn't always bad. There are things that are good. Maybe I am being too fussy. Maybe I have an unrealistic idea of how relationships should be. Enough stuff here is fun. Grandiose narcissistic relationships can, interestingly, work pretty good in terms of structurally. The betrayal makes them less than optimal psychologically. But with grandiose narcissistic folks, life can be good and pleasant and engaging and even fun at times. And since there's an army of enablers that tends to ride along on the grandiose narcissistic person's gravy train, it can contribute to that stuckness that you may feel, that they do have a merry band of validators and admirers, which can not only leave you questioning yourself more, and then that, of course, there's that age-old fear. What if this next person that they're probably already fooling around with gets the better version of them? There's not a better version. But there's also the issue of that this big group of people that they're embedded in, you may like spending time with some of them too. In my experience, grandiose narcissistic folks are the narcissistic type that is the most likely to end the relationship themselves, largely because they get their new supply sorted out before leaving. The malignant narcissistic people are getting their supply through power and domination. So if that dynamic is firmly in place in their relationship, ending it doesn't make sense for them. And the vulnerable narcissistic folks are getting their supply through having targets for their grievances and anger about how unfair the world is to them. And whomever is willing to be around and be the audience for that is not likely to be replaced. And it's also kind of exhausting for a vulnerable narcissist to go out there and find someone else. And because the threat of replacement is always looming in a grandiose narcissistic relationship, far more than with other types, again, the stuck factor is more of not wanting to let go of something that has its shiny moments, and that it seems like at times other people seem really keen to take away from you. You know how it is. We aren't ever as interested in the thing in our life as when we think someone else wants it. That's even true with a grandiose narcissistic partner. With the other types, like communal and self-righteous narcissism, some of the stuckness relates to what the prevailing flavor of the big three types they have. Communal malignant narcissist, that sort of cult leader type, that fear part will prevail. Communal grandiose narcissist, the I don't want to walk away too soon because maybe they're not so bad, may be what keeps you stuck. Stuck is everything when it comes to understanding narcissistic relationships. This isn't about you being a narcissist magnet or having a bad picker or being a sucker or being a codependent. It's about the insidious dynamics of these relationships that make some folks more vulnerable to stuckness than others. And then that gets multiplied by the type of narcissism it is. if you have had more than one type of narcissist or more than one narcissistic relationship in your life, you know what I mean, and may very well see that your form of stuckness varied on the basis of the type of narcissist you were in a relationship with. I hope that clears things up, and thanks again.